country, old-fashioned way of styling hair. And the idea is that if you're moving to the city, if you wanted hair that looked cosmopolitan and sophisticated. And for women, that meant straight hair. So there was a moving away of braided hair because you didn't look cityfied.
A lot of that has to do with, in our contemporary context, of why we see there being kind of real consequences for African American women who wear their hair in braids or wear their hair in locks or decide to do any other style that does not conform to a Eurocentric standard of beauty.
The first time braids, or cornrows in particular, were seen and popularized by a non-Black person was with Bo Derek. In 1979, she was a not very well-known actress who got cast in a movie 10. It was a 10-minute part. Her husband, who was also her manager, wanted to make sure that it could be used as a springboard for her getting famous. So she was a young, blonde woman coming out of the water with these long, blonde cornrows. And the style took off so much that if you start looking at magazines from 1979, like Newsweek, they start calling them bow braids. That was suddenly when they started being called beautiful and acceptable. There were also salons setting up just to do bow braids on white women in 1979, charging anywhere from $300 to $500 and letting the women know that it would probably only last a few days. Because of the texture of white hair compared to the texture of most Black people's hair, a Black woman getting cornrows, that's her style for way more than 3 days. And in 1979, it was absolutely not costing a Black woman $300 to $500 to get her hair cornrowed. They were also seen as being really exotic. There's nothing exotic about the hairstyle being worn by scores of other non-exotic American Black people. In the 50s, especially by the 60s, there were always currents of Black women, particularly on college campuses and on both coasts, who cornrowed their hair. And by the late 60s and early 70s, the style had really caught on. It was on television, if you think of Kim Fields on Facts of Life and Janet Jackson on Good Times. They often wore their hair in 2 braids. For me, it was so important to see someone who looked like me on television. And braids were the things that connected us outside of just being Black girls on TV.
Brandy and Moesha, Poetic Justice. I remember seeing Patra.
Alicia Keys started the backwards braids, which was so cool.
Everybody had braids. It was like the thing in hip hop in general. You know what I mean? Even in basketball, when Iverson came out with the braids, the Iversons, like everybody wanted the Iversons. Everybody wanted, I wanted the Iversons, your mother wanted the Iversons, everybody wanted the Iversons, you know?
What you see is there's this kind of glorification for African American women's beauty, something that's raving across. But for African American women who wear cornrows, there are significant consequences for wearing just that style.
Soon after Bo Derek popularized cornrows, there was a court case in 1981, a discrimination suit filed by a Black woman named Renee Rogers. She had worked for American Airlines, and she wore her hair in cornrows. Her legal argument was that her hairstyle was a part of her cultural heritage. The judge ruled against her in federal court because he said she got her hair done soon after the movie 10 came out, and therefore there was no legal basis for saying it was cultural heritage because she was doing something that essentially was imitating how Bo Derek styled her hair.
There are many cases where women went with braids or with natural hair, and that wasn't seen as professional because they were expected to socialize and assimilate to white American cultural norms.
I came into the restaurant, I had black braids with like this color. And you know, restaurant spec is you have your hair in a ponytail, pulled back out of your face, whatever. So I had it all back in like a long, just regular Dutch braid hanging. I saw like the management side-eyed me like throughout my shift, throughout the day. They sat me down and he's like, you know, I want to talk to you about your hair. And I'm like, what about it? I'm thinking it might be a little too ethnic for the restaurant. Is there a way we can tone it down? Tone it down? Like, how do you want me to tone down my braids, you know? I said, you know what? I'm sorry, but I won't be taking my hair down. You have any other suggestions? He goes, well, I'm gonna have to contact corporate and see how we can handle this because I just don't think it's restaurant spec. Okay. The next day, he told me I didn't have to come in for my shift.
It's because there's this general understanding that if you want a black person to appear scary or not like fitting in with quote unquote American values, it's to show us with natural textured hair.
The running joke now at that restaurant, since I've opened the braid bar, over half of his staff gets their hair braided here. All of the white girls. There are even white girls there in faux locks.
People tell me like, oh, I gotta get my hair braided, but I gotta take it off Monday because it's not corporate, for work. Or the kids gotta come Friday because they got a party on Saturday, but they gotta take the braids off for school. How do braids affect education or my productivity at work?
Decades after Bo Derek was responsible for completely whitewashing the cultural heritage of cornrows, we have the Kardashians today doing the same thing with cornrows and other braided styles.
I'm offended.
It offended me tremendously.
You're straight up stealing.
Give credit where it's due.
It's an outrage. Like, you're calling these boxer braids. No, these are cornrows.
It's not a new trend. They've been killing it, innovating it in Africa for years.
Boxer braids, whatever the fuck those are, they're actually really shitty braids too. Anybody that knows anything about braids will tell you that those were bad braids.
I know I've been in braids all my life. I can tell you at least 30 years of it ain't new.
I've never known a time without braids.
It's the audacity to confidently name something that you did not create, that has existed for years. That's something that's problematic.
Correct it. Just say you know what? We didn't come up with that, but it's cool. We like it, but this is not ours. We didn't come up with this. I was so bitter. I was telling people, if you call me to book an appointment for boxer braids, good luck on your appointment. You will not get it.
It's deeply offensive that people who have made so much money off of taking these parts of black culture and appropriating them would not even get the correct terminology behind them to just describe what they've appropriated.
When things are coming into a high fashion realm and they are magically something really cool and people that are upper class can wear them and, be cool and edgy, it's just kind of like a slap in the face to the people who were told they were ghetto and getting nasty looks when they were wearing it.
I do get offended when you see box braids being labeled as XYZ in a fashion that is not in its most authentic self, because it's suppressing my culture, which too often gets suppressed. So at least when you are trying to globalize it, come correct. That's all.
Because cultural appropriation is more of an open conversation, I think that people have kind of chilled and a lot of people are trying to really correct themselves. So I think that that's good and it gives me hope for the future. Although you may have, jacked something that you may not have known that much about, once you learned that it's tied to a culture and you may have kind of overstepped your bounds a little bit and you want to correct that, then that's fine. Everybody makes mistakes.
I'm an artist. I'm a hairdresser. I believe any client that walks into my space, I should be able to give them anything that they ask for. So I often will get loads of women with Asian hair or European hair asking for braids. I take that with great pride because they're coming to someone like myself knowing that I am from a culture that understands braids and have had braids myself. So therefore you take the lead and you guide them in the most appropriate way to get the best of the look that they're looking for.
I think one of the greatest things that's happened in the last few years around cornrows and braids is how it's become this style that we're seeing played with by so many black female celebrities.
The number of black women that are just so into braids and natural hair right now is so great a number that it kind of outweighs that kind of feeble, trendy, quick gimmick type deal.
I love that it's just taken its place to show that it's just another way to express feeling beautiful.